Severe weather is in play for your Monday. Where will we see the greatest threat of damaging winds, hail, and even tornadoes? Snow falls across the Rockies, and your week long outlook next at the Weather Farm. Hello, welcome to the Weather Farm. I'm meteorologist Christopher Hale, and we want to jump right into this forecast because we have a very active Monday in store for most of the central plains and southern parts of the plains into Texas for our Monday. So let's jump right into our forecast. Right here we have the weather map as of 7 o'clock this morning. It shows showers across Missouri into parts of Illinois, into central Michigan. Across the Rockies, we have areas of snow that are extending down into New Mexico, but it is this area from Oklahoma into Arkansas into far northern Texas that we're going to be watching on our Monday. So let's look at our hazard index. We see that this area, a large area in the south central plains, is under a flood watch. We expect significant amounts of rain over the next few days. Some amounts could total 6 to 8 inches. We do have a tornado watch in effect for parts of Oklahoma into Arkansas in advance of the storms that we anticipate for our Monday. The Storm Prediction Center has outlined this area for an enhanced risk of severe weather. Again, the main threats that are going to be on our Monday are going to be the damaging winds, the lightning, and small hail. But however, we cannot rule out the threat of tornadoes, especially in this enhanced risk. And this covers parts of eastern Oklahoma, northern Texas, western Arkansas, and far southwestern Missouri. Outside of that, a slight risk of severe weather. Again, doesn't mean that you can't see a tornado here. It's just that the greatest chance is in this highlighted area here. But all forms of severe weather are in play in the slight and enhanced risk areas for our Monday. So let's look at that tornado risk that we mentioned. The Storm Prediction Center has outlined a 10% chance or greater of a tornado forming within a 25-mile radius of any spot within this circle. And again, this is primarily in southeastern Oklahoma, far northern Texas, and far western Arkansas. That is where the greatest risk is going to be for our Monday. Outside of that, a 5% chance of a tornado forming. And we really expect that the timing of this is going to happen more in the afternoon, but there's a lot of variables that could come into play, and we want to discuss those with you. Because if we look at the system here at 7 o'clock, we see that there's rain out ahead of it. We see a low moving out of Oklahoma. It's going to move into Missouri, and we're going to have this line forming by about 7 or 8 o'clock. We go into our Tuesday. That line's going to continue to move further east into the Ohio Valley, but it's going to kind of fall apart as the main low goes up into Wisconsin and Minnesota. But the timing, again, is going to be very critical for how all this comes together. So let's look at this. This, again, is at 12 noon. We see across parts of Arkansas, we see some storms. How quickly those storms, will they inhibit this line? I don't know. But we see a lot of discrete cells here forming across parts of eastern Oklahoma. The longer those storms stay discrete, and then they can create their own spin, and they would produce the lower likelihood of creating tornadoes. But once those storms congeal into a line of storms, which we expect to happen around 10, 11, around midnight on our Monday into early Tuesday, the threat of tornadoes greatly diminishes, and then the main threat becomes just the damaging winds and hail embedded in any of these particular thunderstorms. So that is where the setup. Again, we're going to look at this again. At 1 o'clock, we see kind of discrete cells. Each one of these is capable of developing into a tornado. We see that those discrete cells continue to be there till about 5 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock as it moves into Arkansas. That's when we start to think that that line is going to congeal. It's also why the Storm Prediction Center has the greatest threat of the 10% risk of a tornado happening in Oklahoma, because by the time we get later in the day and those storms have congealed into a line, we expect the tornado threat to be diminishing. But earlier in the day, when those storms are discrete and isolated individual cells through parts of Oklahoma, that's when we see the greatest chance of a tornado risk. And we can kind of see this here with the tornado potential. We see that by 6 or 7 o'clock at night, that threat has gone away. We're going to look at this, how it restarts again. It's going to start here at 12 noon. We see the greatest chance. We see those yellows and reds in Oklahoma, but they quickly die out as it moves into Missouri and Arkansas. Again, this is another indication of the tornado potential in the atmosphere. We're going to see a lot of rain from this. This is going to be a heavy rainmaker for areas that do need it because they are under drought conditions. So across parts of Oklahoma, especially eastern Oklahoma, you're going to see 2-4 inches of rain, same to Arkansas. But as we get up into Missouri, far northeastern Oklahoma, that's where the most heaviest rain is going to fall between now and Tuesday night at 7 p.m. We could see easily 4 to 6 inches of rain. And if we take this just a little bit further north, again, here's Missouri and Oklahoma's in the far bottom of the corner, but we see that 4 to 6 inch swath extending across most of central Missouri. We see a 2 to 4 inch swath extending up towards Milwaukee, Rockford, Illinois, down towards Springfield and Peoria, Illinois, and parts of south central Missouri. As we get further east into Indiana and parts of southeastern Michigan, we see lesser amounts. Generally 1/2 to an inch of rain is expected. Most of Wisconsin is going to receive about an inch of rain. Farther to your north and west, across parts of Minnesota, we're going to see that rain change into some snow like we saw with the Halloween storm. So don't be surprised if you wake up on your Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning and you see a couple inches of snow on the ground. But what's causing all this? Well, again, we have that jet stream like we had last week. We see that trough digging across the central plains. Out ahead of it, that's where the spin is going to be the greatest. The winds are going to pull that Gulf moisture up into the storm. We're going to create that line of severe weather. But right behind it, we see another trough beginning to dig by our Wednesday into our Thursday. Now, the eastern coast of the United States, you're going to remain relatively calm with your weather. A lot of this isn't going to make it here, but by Thursday, we have another low that's starting to develop here across the Four Corners region. This one might not be as intense as our Monday storm, but it is something that we're definitely going to watch over the next several days. And we can see also with our upper air pattern, the 500 millibar chart, we see that low that's going to kick out of the Four Corners into the plains on our Monday into Tuesday. It's going to race to the northeast, and right behind it, another one is going to form, and a trough is going to develop. And as I mentioned, across the eastern third of the United States, eastern quarter, basically anything east of the Appalachian Mountains, you're going to see good weather. Not as warm as maybe we have been, but definitely more seasonal to slightly above seasonal weather. Again, we see this low starting to develop by next weekend across the Four Corners. This one, by the time we get into Saturday, might be one that we will want to watch here at the weather farm. So let's play this out for the whole week. Again, this is our Monday storm as it develops across Oklahoma into Arkansas. It forms that line of storms that moves into the Ohio Valley for your election day. If you've not had the chance, please vote on election day. We see snow falling across Colorado into New Mexico, into parts of Nebraska for our Wednesday as that system dives south. We see some hints down here in the Gulf. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But by Thursday and Friday, we have another low that's starting to really get its act going. It's going to bring snow to Colorado and then rain out ahead of it into Kansas, into Missouri, and parts of Nebraska. This is the system that I think we do have to watch as we get into our Thursday, Friday, and our Saturday. So in our next video that we plan to release on Thursday, do check back as we will have more data on that particular storm. Well, I mentioned the tropics, so let's take a look at that right now. Out in the far eastern Atlantic, in the northeastern Atlantic, we have Tropical Storm Patty, who's making its way east at about 20 miles per hour. Winds are about 45 miles per hour. Is expected to impact the European mainland later this week. This area north of the Dominican, it's an area of unsettled weather we've been watching for several days now. It really has a 0% chance of development into a tropical system, but it is something that we are going to continue to monitor as it kind of just meanders here north of the Dominican and into Cuba. But all eyes, and the thing that social media has been talking about for weeks now has been what is going to happen here in the Western Caribbean. Are we going to see another hurricane? Are we going to see a storm? What's going to happen? Many thought this would become Patty, but Patty formed from another system. So this is Tropical Depression 18. It currently has winds as of Sunday night at about 35 miles per hour. It is moving to the north at about 5 miles per hour. It is in a favorable environment, so there's a large area of high pressure off the southeastern coast of the United States. So when we think about those clockwise winds that move around a high pressure, if this continues to move north, it's going to get caught up in those winds, and that's going to kind of want to push it a little bit to the west. Some models have it going directly across Cuba and to the east of Florida. Some models do have it making that little jog between the Yucatan and Cuba and making its way into the Gulf of Mexico. We will continue to watch this and get further data each and every day and see what the latest track is for Tropical Depression 18, and does it form into a tropical storm or does it intensify into a hurricane? Climatologically speaking, storms this late in the season typically don't intensify as quickly as we've seen with maybe Helene or Milton, but we do remember that those ocean sea surface temperatures are still very warm for this time of year, so it is definitely something that we want to continue watching. So we look at our weather. We talked about the weather patterns that's going to happen. One of the things that's going to help to fuel these storms over parts of the Central Plains is going to be the extreme warmth. That's going to add juice to that environment. And you got a deep pipeline of moisture from the Gulf into this. Temperatures in the 80s, dew points in the 60s and 70s, all the right ingredients coming together for a line of storms. And a sharp temperature contrast, because you go across parts of western Kansas, you're down in the 30s, 40s, and 50s for temperatures on your Monday. Out ahead of it, the Ohio Valley, 70s are the rural, 80s down along the coast. But across the Intermountain West, we're going to have temperatures generally in the 20s, 30s, and even 40s for parts of Idaho. As we look at our Tuesday, we're going to see that cooler weather continue, but it's going to intensify just a little bit. So we're going to see a little bit more widespread 20s and 30s for your afternoon highs, as opposed to the 30s and 40s we saw on Monday. Where we see that rain, where that front has moved through on Monday, temperatures are going to cool down for parts of Oklahoma into the 60s. Those 80s are going to be suppressed further south along the Gulf Coast. But as I mentioned, the eastern third of the United States stays relatively warm and above normal for this time of the year, with temperatures in the 70s and 80s. We even see 60s making their way up into Maine, and Boston, you could be approaching 70 for your election day. And then into our Wednesday, that warmth continues to spread a little bit further east, but also gets shifted a little bit further south and east, because temperatures in the Great Lakes have cooled into the 50s and 60s, 70s to the south. Those 80s that we saw widespread on our Monday are really confined down into parts of Louisiana and Mississippi and far southern Texas. The 20s and 30s and 40s across the Intermountain West continue to be the temperature that is expected for our Wednesday. I do want to point your attention here. We start to see a large area of 20s for afternoon highs across the Canadian prairies. Even some teens up near to the south and east of Hudson Bay. Same thing across parts of Quebec and Newfoundland. That is a sign of the colder temperature and the snowpack that is beginning to build north of the border. And it's one of the things that we can talk about as we start to see the snowfall that's expected for this coming week. We expect the heavy snows in the Rockies and parts of Colorado into New Mexico, Wyoming, and Idaho. We're going to be measuring snow 1 to 2 feet by Sunday morning. Parts of British Columbia, where you've seen a lot of snow already this year, another 20, 30 inches of snow could be expected in those higher elevations by your Sunday. But as I mentioned with the temperature map, look at this deep snow that's expected across the northern parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and into Ontario. We could easily see 4 to 6 inches of snow. As we get into northeastern Quebec, into Newfoundland and those parts of the Canadian provinces, we easily see 8, 10, 12 inches of snow. So again, this is all of a sign that as this snowpack continues to build north of the Canadian border, and we get these rounds and these low pressures that continue to dive in from the northwest down into the central plains and then eject out into the Ohio Valley, as each of those continue to happen, they're coming across that snowpack. So they're going to continue to get a little bit colder each and every time. And as that snowpack continues to build further south, that's going to allow the lower 48 to get into that wintertime pattern where temperatures are cooling. So stay tuned on a pattern change that we may see as we approach the second half of November. And again, I'll just remind you, the thing to keep in mind for your Monday is this line of discrete cells as it develops across Texas and Oklahoma 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Those discrete cells pose the greatest risk for tornadic activity, especially in eastern Oklahoma. As that line congeals, as it moves into Arkansas, the threat of tornadoes diminishes, but we definitely would have the damaging winds and hail potential with these storms. We hope you've enjoyed your time here at the Weather Farm. We hope that you will stop by again soon. If we have any other updates, we will post them here. But again, our next regularly scheduled video will be on Thursday. We hope that you have a great week, and we'll see you soon.